that, and especially in matters of the heart and in matters of mercy and compassion, whereby, sometimes our hearts get hardened. And in this case, this is another one of those areas where our hearts can get hardened, in the sense that when we are knowledgeable and we start to understand the things of God, what can happen is we can get puffed up, we can get so bold that we forget that there are other weaker people around us who their consciences cannot cope quite often with what we have already settled in our minds and think that everything's okay. And a typical example of that would be, for example, if you were in a church and a weaker brother or sister saw you going into a pub in the daytime, and you said, "Oh, well, it's fine, it's okay for me to drink." And of course we know that it is okay for us to drink. We can drink. In fact, if we're eating, Paul says, take a little wine with your food. But because we feel we're standing firm and we can feel strong, there is a side of us that says, well, it's okay, I can do more or less what I want to. And we forget about those people who are coming to faith, who are looking on. And this is where this whole idea of trying to be, I wouldn't say whiter than white, but certainly trying to give a good witness. I think that's where we're going to. That's where this is taking us, that we need to be a good witness to those weaker brothers or sisters that are around us. And whereas someone could perhaps take some fairly strong, mature teaching when we are going into error, and maybe someone could take being told, I think you're going off track here, I think you're starting to fall into error here, you need to come back, or you're doing this wrong or that wrong, that you need to really think about what you're doing before God. Sometimes we have to be a bit more gentle in our approach to people, and because they can't necessarily take what we're saying at the time. And so our witness is not just about doing things that may cause someone else to stumble, but also saying things that can cause someone else to stumble. How often have you heard, and it is wrong, I know, but how often have you heard someone who has been coming to church, going to church regularly, and then a more mature Christian does something wrong? And I can say that when I first became a Christian, a pastor, an assistant pastor in our church, fell from grace. And a lot of young Christians in that church, it affected them deeply. And some of them, I'm not sure whether they actually fell away from church, but certainly it affected them a great deal and put them back some, long way, really. Fortunately, my love for the pastor and wanting to, caring about him, rose above the fact that he had fallen into sin and missed the mark in this situation, and there was a big problem in the church. But there should still be love for the person who has sinned. It's not the person that we're not loving, we're not condoning the sin. We should be still loving the person. But for some young Christians, they don't necessarily get that bit yet. They haven't actually got to that part. And so sometimes they don't understand that you have to divorce the two. That you have to love the sinner, hate the sin. And so this is a whole area where we have to be very careful that we don't cause someone to stumble. At the same time, it is down to every man's conscience to do what's right before God. So, that's not an excuse for a young Christian to say, well, you upset me, so therefore I've gone off. No, that's not good enough. But we still have to take on board the fact that could be what could happen with some weaker individuals. That when we do something knowing that we're quite safe and we're not likely to fall into sin when we're doing something. We're quite mature and responsible, and we're doing something knowing full well that we are standing in Christ. We're standing on the rock, and that's okay, you know. But we just have to be careful that we're not affecting somebody else adversely, that somebody else isn't falling foul of the fact that they see us in what they consider to be a sin, and it wounds their consciences, it wounds them inside and causes them to feel that they have to sin in some way. It could be all sorts of things. There could be all manner of things that would cause that. In this case, Paul's talking about eating food sacrificed to idols, and that he would obviously be able to eat that food, ask God's blessing on it. It wouldn't matter the fact that someone had sacrificed it to an idol. The food is still okay. The food is still good in itself. It's just that, one party has said, I'm going to offer this to my God, small g, and yet we can come along and as Christians we can say, well, I don't care about that, I'm going to ask God's blessing far greater than whatever God you might have sacrificed this idol to, this food to, and I'm going to eat it and I'm going to be fine because God's going to bless it to my body and he made everything in this earth, so it's all right. But a weaker Christian could feel, if they had to eat with you at that point, they could actually feel very wounded in their spirit. It could really affect them deeply and wound them, and so that they would really be upset and worried and feel that they were doing something wrong. And I think it's in that area. And so whatever we're doing, we have to remember, no man is an island. We do affect other people. We can't just do what we want to do without thinking of others. So this is where the hypocrisy comes into the church, in a sense, in that people always trying to show this good witness on the outside, even though maybe they are not so whiter than white on the inside. And so that, I think this is one of the areas it kind of comes from, because we always want to try and to show others that we are godly people and that we're trying to do the right thing and everything else. So this is something that's going on all the time. And licentiousness in itself is just to be able to do anything you want to, and nothing's going to matter. You can do what you want to because you're saved, is not the right attitude. It's not what we preach and teach here, even though we are saying you need to be love conscious and not sin conscious all the time, that you need to focus on loving God and loving your fellow man, loving yourself, loving others. That's the commandment that God gave us through Christ in this period of grace. But that doesn't mean to say we can just do what we want and nothing matters. Of course it matters, and it also matters to weaker young Christians looking to us for a lead. So that's all I'm going to say on that subject today. And we're going to go through to Mark's Gospel